don't know anything about cults.
You know nothing about cults? You have no
Not really. I
personal
mean,
interaction with cults?
I know don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. All right.
Never
So
drink the Kool-Aid. Go to any Christian event, never drink Kool-Aid.
never.
What else?
Never.
Never.
So I have a few cult stories
Okay.
from my personal interactions with cults. And I just want to start off with saying that you're going to be, anyone who knows me, has been watching this channel or my channel, you're not going to be surprised with how a lot of these cult stories have to do with me trying to get laid too. I know it's surprising for the man who stopped masturbating for Jesus when he was 13. That somehow my desire to have hot sex would somehow get merged with cults, and there would be trouble. There'd be horrible, horrible trouble that comes from it.
Horrible trouble.
Yeah. So, Chris, do you know anything about the Unification Church?
They unify stuff.
I like that. I like your saucy attitude and your wordplay, sir. So let me read you a bit from the Encyclopedia Britannica online about the Unification Church. The Unification Church, byname the Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity, religious movement founded in Pusan, South Korea, by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon in 1954. Known for its mass weddings, the church teaches a unique Christian theology. It has generated much controversy, and its members are commonly derided as Moonies.
Moonies. That's why you called them the Moonies earlier.
Exactly.
Okay. I was paying attention. I heard that. Okay.
You heard that? Okay. So how did I get embroiled with Moonies? That's
trying to get laid.
Right, exactly. And
you were trying to get your stick wet, and you got hooked up with a cult.
But the thing is, right, you may be surprised about this. You may be surprised about this. When I was really young, I just looked like a sucker. I just looked like a sucker.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, dude. So I was in London. I went to the UK when I was 19 years old. This is 1987, mind you. And this is relevant to the story, how long ago it was. So I was in London for a week. I was hosteling in London. And then I went on the British Rail for 2 weeks. I went up to Scotland. I went to Wales. And then I came back to London for my final week. So a full 4-week period in the UK, or at least, everything but Northern Ireland. So there was this video game arcade that I would like to frequent when I, was in London. And one day, after playing this great game that I loved playing, it was called Space Harrier. It was a game that I was able to flip. I could flip this game, Chris. I could just put a couple of coins in, and I could play for maybe 40 minutes. And I could just start from zero and flip it back to zero. It was pretty much my only crowning achievement back in 1987. So, and back then we didn't have these. We didn't have these little handheld computers. So what I had, which just identified me as a sucker even more, was one of these little travel books, right? So it just said, hey, look at me. I look like a sucker, and I am a tourist too at the same time, which makes me the ideal person to recruit for a cult. Because the thing is about cults, they don't try to recruit everyone. They try to find the people who are vulnerable, right? To bring into their fold, right? The people who might be malleable or separated from their loved ones, right? So I'm 3,000 miles away from anyone I know, just by identifying with this, touristy book. So I am the ideal person to recruit. But I did not know this because I was only 19 years old and pretty stupid, even stupid for a 19-year-old, just oblivious. And of course, randy, if I'm going to use that term, horny, randy. And so I'm reading through my book, and this woman starts chatting me up. Very attractive woman, early 20s, the big brown eyes, the wonderful hair. She has it going. I asked me how I'm doing, and I'm going, well, I'm doing quite well. Thank you very much.
Better now.
In retrospect, I should have all of a sudden my alert signals, my yellow alert. If we're going to go with Star Trek, the yellow alert should have been going off right then and there. But because I was so young and horny, I'm thinking more about opportunity than about, is this potentially dangerous?
Right.
What does this person really want?
Right.
But we start chatting, and then she tells me about this tea house, this tea house, this wonderful place. And it's a bookstore too. They just don't have like tea and crumpets and muffins and all that other stuff, but there's books at this place. And it's a pretty cool place. It's where all cool people are hanging out at. And that's where she was going to, Chris.
Okay.
And I said, well, do you mind if I tag along? And you see what she did there was that she didn't even ask me to go along. She didn't even ask me. I asked her. I asked her. Okay. So we get to the tea house, the crumpets house, 1987, flock of seagulls hair. I had a lot of hair actually on my head. I'm just responding to tons of mice. I was in my denim jacket, my denim jeans. I had this Bob Dylan kind of vibe going on there. So we go to this tea house bookstore, and as she stated, there was tea. There were all the pastries. There were the books. There were other people there. And at no point did I perceive that this was a front for a cult, that this was she was a salt lick, I guess, right, to get me into the gingerbread house.
A salt lick. Yeah, good. That's good. Carry
on. So we're there and we're talking. And, when I was like 19 years old, I was still, finding my way about religion, still kind of religious, thinking about Jesus. I was not an agnostic. I was probably some version of liberal Christian. That's how you would, a la carte Christian. That's how I was. But I was still a believer. And she wanted to talk about Jesus. And I'm like, sure, we could talk about Jesus, thinking in the back of my head, it's going to be weird if somehow talking about Jesus is going to get me laid. But, who am I to argue with fate? And then she talks about this particular church that she belongs to, the Unification Church. And I go, oh, I had never heard of them, because back in 1987, I had heard of the Moonies, as most of us had back then, at least somewhere. It was in the zeitgeist, right? But I didn't know their official name was the Unification Church. And then she dropped the name of the founder, Sun Myung Moon. And I'm going to myself, well, you can't ask her if they're Moonies, because even then it's kind of like a slanderous term, right? But by then, I'm like really intrigued about the church, about her. I was in hook, line, and sinker. So we agreed I was going to come back the next day, and I was going to look at some of their material, some of their texts, and there would even be a little video I could watch too. And I said, all right, sure. So I come back the next day. I meet up with her. We have some tea. Once again, we chat. And then I go upstairs where there is I could watch this film. We're in little cubicles, and there was a monitor there, and they played me a film about how Jesus actually failed when he was down here on earth. Because what God really wanted Jesus to do was that God wanted Jesus to create a perfect family on earth. And only by creating a perfect family on earth could we all be saved. Mm-hmm. But Chris, I'm going to tell you something. You know what's great about Reverend Sun Myung Moon?
What's that?
He was the Messiah, and he was able to create a perfect family.
Okay, well, good then. That's wonderful. I
And
mean, hey,
so
problem solved.
so he is the way, the truth, and the light, not Jesus, but Reverend Moon. And that now that this is obviously true, it was only like natural for me to join the Unification Church. And I just want to say, I did not join the Unification Church. I've never been really this might surprise you. I've never been a big joiner. It's not just in my DNA, to tell you the truth, probably. But I did still want to get laid.
Of course.
So I saw the film, saw the video, agreed to meet up with her, probably like the day before I was going to go off to Scotland, because that was the first leg of my trip, was going up to Scotland. And so I meet up with her again, and we're just hanging out. And this is when she drops the bombshell. And I swear to my fictitious God, I'm not making this up. She is married. Her husband is like a 3rd-degree black belt in karate. And he is in a karate competition in Germany as we spoke.
Really?
And now you would think, now all of a sudden I realized that, well, there's no way I'm getting laid in this whole scenario.
I was curious. That doesn't necessarily preclude the fact that you might get laid, but yeah, I understand where you might start being a little downhearted about it at this point.
Right. Statistically speaking, the chances were getting lower and lower. But I was so intrigued by these people because, upon reflection, it's like they're Moonies, and I knew that Moonies were that people of this church. They were involved with these mass weddings, Chris, in Madison Square Garden. That the Reverend would just randomly pick people and say, you two marry, you two are going to get married, you two are going to get married, you two are going to get married. And that's what I knew. Now, the thing is, back in 1987, not having these little devices, you couldn't just Google that crap. Because think about it. If I could Google that while she was going to the bathroom, I would have just been like reading, looking. And, I would have known everything at that point. But I was so intrigued by this group. I felt like I had to stay engaged with them. So I went off for my 2 weeks trip up to Scotland and Wales, a bit of England, came back, and then I hung out with her a couple of more times. I had a wonderful spaghetti dinner at their headquarters. I think it was Leicester Gate. I think it was around there. I don't know. It's been a long time. But I had this wonderful pasta dinner, and I saw the second half of Gandhi, the movie Gandhi. And she was really trying hard. And this is what all cults do, once again, is they try to separate you from your loved ones, from the connections that you have already cobbled together. And they want you to forge a whole new identity, a whole new series of relationships in the cult. So she tried to keep me in the UK. She tried to keep me there. And when she realized that I was going home, no matter how crappy home was, Chris, and home was pretty crappy, don't get me wrong, it was still better than hanging out with the Moonies, regardless of the free pasta.
Right.
Because
especially if you weren't getting laid.
I wasn't getting laid, dude. I wasn't getting laid.
Yeah, see, if you were getting laid, that would maybe make up for a little bit of it, but...
Yep. Right. Because there are, just as a tangent, there are cults who tempt people in with sex, right? They're just
well, I mean, that's how she tempted you that far, right?
That's how she tempted me that far.
Right? Led you along.
So she realized that I was going back to the States one way or the other. And then she got me to verbally contract with her, I believe is the behavioral term, for me to seek out the youth organization of the Unification Church in America when I returned. I said, sure. I was just lying. I had no intent on checking out the Unification Church at all when I got back, because there were obviously some weird sect of Christianity, which I had no desire to be part of, because I already had my crazy sect of Christianity being a Baptist.